live discussion, we are going to discuss a very interesting topic: flexibility in math problem solving. So, in this live discussion, we are going to talk about whether students should choose their own method or they should be restricted in choosing their own method to solve any math particular problem. So, I'm joined by Nanaya Ogazi and then Patience. So I'm just taking a stand between the two, whether should students be allowed to choose their own method in solving any math problem or they should be restricted. So Nanayo.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your panelist to discuss um, this topic. I'm really excited. By the way, I'm Nanaya.
Patience, I see.
Okay. So in your view, should students be restricted in choosing their own method or they should be allowed the freedom to choose their own method to solve any math problem?
To me, I think students should not be restricted. They should be allowed to do whatever they want. Okay. When a problem is being given to a student, he or she should be given a chance to explore, to check out different means or ways of going by that particular problem, and not necessarily restricting the person to go by. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, for me, I think whether the students should be restricted or not should depend on the context in which the question is being asked and the domain or the dimension the assessor or the teacher wants to measure. So it shouldn't be one way. In some instances, they should be restricted. In some instances, too, they should be given the freedom. I'm saying this because I've come to notice that for some students, you see, when you are learning trigonometry, there are some aspects that will ask you to, let's say, find the value of x, given that tan into bracket x plus 30 equal to 1 on 2. For some students, due to overgeneralization of concept, we'll expand this and write tan x plus tan 30 equal to 1 on 2. Instead of find the tan inverse of 1 on 2, make x the subject and then calculate for the value of x. So in some cases, if you leave students to do whatever they want, I think that will not help. Sometimes restricting them is good, especially let's take this topic, for example, quadratic equations. You see, you can solve it using the method of completing the squares, using the quadratic formula, the graphical approach, or using the method of factorization. But here is the case whereby for some questions, the factorization approach will not work for it. So in such cases, the teacher will restrict you that you solve it using the method of completing the squares. And sometimes too, there are some approaches that demand the student to apply critical thinking or problem solving. So the teacher will restrict the student so that he or she can assess the critical thinking ability of the students. But if you see, students always want the easy way out. So in situations where you allow them to use any method they want, like any way they can get the answer, then it will be problematic. And one thing that we have to take it into consideration is that in mathematics, we don't only consider the answer, but the steps involved. So if you allow the students to just use any approach to get the answer, the student can do like maneuver some way, come and get the answer. But the process will not make sense in the realm of mathematics. So sometimes restricting students is good, but sometimes to giving them the freedom is cool. But that will be based on the context. And you see, it is not all the questions asked in mathematics that restrict students. You get it?
Yes.
Yeah. So it is two-way thing, right? Positive, negative. So for me, it will be based on the context and the domain that you want to measure. That would determine whether if you should restrict the student or not. I think we learned something in discrete math, the application of graphs and the other things. Maybe you are picking rubbish from this place to other place. So supposing you leave the student to go in, let's say you want to go, let's say from A to Z. If you don't restrict the student by saying you want it to be in such a way that we will incur minimum cost, if you don't restrict the student that way, then the student will just take any path that will lead him or her to Z. However, that may not be the minimum cost. Do you get it? So restricting students is good, and sometimes to giving them the freedom is also good, and it all holds in mathematics. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this. But my problem is, maybe, for example, you have taught a student quadratic equation using maybe two approaches, let's say almighty formula and a method of completing squares. And in assessment, you are asking or restricting the student to use method of completing square. Meanwhile, the child is not comfortable using method of completing squares. In that way, is it the best thing to do?
Honestly speaking, I don't just like that restriction thing. We are not all the same. Okay. Someone can use this method perfectly, but I can't use that method. Okay. So there shouldn't be restrictions, because sometimes learning is kind of bulky and there are lots of things we need to learn. Not only maths per se, there are different subjects and courses we also have to learn. Okay, so you can't expect that I should learn or sort of like memorize every single thing. Okay, learn completing of the square, learn factorization, learn almighty formula. No, I can just choose one that I am good at and perfect it and move on. So that restriction thing shouldn't work. It should be open for us. We learn at different paces. Others are fast, others are slow. Others can learn the 3 or 4 at a go, but some have to take one, perfect it before moving to the others. So to me, it is not reasonable to restrict a student on a particular method.
Nanaya, what do you say about this? This is very interesting, because to me, students should be allowed, two methods are used to find the root of a quadratic equation, and you are in examination, you are restricting the student to use only method of completing the squares. I think you are really imposing your this thing on the student. What do you say about this?
Well, the whole concepts and issue about learning is that um, you don't limit yourself to what you think you are comfortable with. And the teacher has the right to assess you on any method, supposing he or she taught you that. Let's say the teacher taught you the quadratic equation, and you were taking through all the 4 approaches. Then the teacher has the right to assess you on any of them. And you see, let's bring this down to like home. Like, let's say you have a child, right? And then you tell this child that your life is in your hands, and for that matter, anything that you think you can use to become worthy or successful, you like go that way or use that approach. Do you think that is good to do that? That is where parents will restrict you. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. I established this earlier. Students always, and this easy way is not always feasible to different situations or problems. You can restrict yourself to the use of, let's say, the factorization approach in solving quadratic equation. But there are some equations, the method of factorization will not work. So supposing you saw that one to be easy and you decided to focus on it only and perfect it, now you've come across a problem where this approach is not going to be feasible. In that case, what are you going to do? Do you get it? So this restriction is in mathematics so as to make students master all approaches. Do you get it? If I leave you and I say, oh, go by the approach that you think you want, the factorization approach is quite simple as compared to the method of completing the square, and it doesn't demand any critical thinking ability here as compared to the method of completing the squares. So let's say you as a student, you've restricted yourself to that. Now you come across a question where you are not getting the factors for the product of the A and C. That means that this factorization approach is not going to work. And you being the type that restrict yourself to what you think you are comfortable with, you're going to get stuck. But if as a teacher you know that I can restrict you to use this and that, you tend to master all the others so as not to find yourself wanting. Supposing per the question given, your approach is not going to be feasible. Do we get it? In the real life, let's say you are an engineer or something like that, and you are that type that restrict yourself to what you think you are comfortable with. You see, it is not all problems that what you think you are comfortable with will be feasible. Do you get it? It's like constructing a road. Maybe this is the approach you know, and you've perfected that, and you didn't focus on the others. Now you come across a problem that your approach is not feasible. What are you going to do?
Okay, so my problem is that you see we have so many ways of solving a particular math problem. So let's take into consideration children who are finding math very difficult or learning deficiencies, right? As patients say, we are not all the same. So maybe a particular method will be very difficult to a particular student. So restricting a student to use a particular method, do you think will favor all students?
So the thing is, without this restriction, students will be stagnant. This is what I know. This is what I'm going for. No need to master other areas. Do you get it? In the absence of restriction, this is what is going to come. You are not restricting students. Do what you think you are conversant with. That means that I will only focus on what I think I know, leaving the others. And that is not how we learn mathematics. Mathematics is not stagnant. That I should approach
By
it.
any means.
You see that I should approach it as I am conversant with. You see, the educationist, Archimedes, then other major key players when it comes to mathematics and mathematics teaching and learning. Let me put this in quote. They are not fools to restrict you that do this, do that. They have their philosophical background backing all this. If you leave a student to always go by what he thinks is the easy, you are spoiling him or her. The student will be stagnant. This is what I know. I am going by it. Do you get it? That is why teachers will restrict you. You see, there are some methods you not apply any critical thinking ability or problem solving ability there. So teachers will restrict you to assess you on that domain or dimension. So it's not always that you have to leave students to use any approach that you think will help, or do this thing that you think you will get the answer. No, it shouldn't be like that.
Okay.
Right? Maybe you want to assess student problem solving skills. Maybe you want to assess critical thinking ability of students, which is what we aim at achieving in this 21st century. And you give a student a quadratic equation to solve. The student is conversant with using the quadratic formula. You didn't restrict him or her to use the method of completing the squares, which demands some sort of critical thinking. So if the student uses the quadratic formula, what are you measuring here? What critical thinking skills or ability are you measuring here? That doesn't demand application of any critical thinking. Do you get it? That is why teachers will restrict you to measure the dimension or domain that they are interested in. And aside that, restricting students to use a certain approach reduces the workload of the teachers in some way. I will explain.
Okay.
Let's say you are teaching quadratic equation, right? You are teaching quadratic equation, and you didn't restrict the student to a certain approach or a certain method. In that case, supposing the question is a theory question, that means that the student can use anyone he or she wants. Does it mean you are going to provide a marking scheme for the use of factorization, for the use of quadratic formula, for the use of the graphical approach? Does it mean you are going to provide marking scheme for all this? Do you get it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there it's very serious here. I want Pat to come in because this is somehow because we are talking about inclusiveness here, and you have students who are Pat. So what do you say here?
Now, guys, all that you were saying, you are making the teacher look like an authoritative figure. Bear in mind, the teacher is supposed to be a facilitator, guide the students, go through this way, go through that way. That's why the formulas, you see, in solving it, you don't just have one way. We have diverse ways of going by it. So restricting a student to one method or way is like imposing on that person's right. Bear in mind, we live in a democratic environment. Okay, and the teacher shouldn't act autocratic in the class by imposing that you should use this thing. Now, those things you were saying that he's measuring their problem solving, measuring productivity, measuring creativity, most of those things are even measured in the classroom way before the assessment period. Because when you give students question, you work the thing with them, then you give another one for them to try. As a teacher, because you are a facilitator, you are guiding them, so sometimes you get close to them, go through the solution they are giving. Then you can even measure that, oh, this person or this student was using this method, passing this way, going through this. You're able to get some of the things you need. So definitely from that instance, you already know what they are weak at. Okay, and you can work on it. So there you will know that some of the students, they require this, some require that. Now, since you know they require this and some they like this method, most of them like this, and at the exam you just tell them to use completing of the square. Definitely you are favoring those that like that method and neglecting those that use the quadratic or the other formula.
Listen, in mathematics, there is nothing like, as a student, I like this, I want this. That is not education. You are shifting the whole communication. We are not talking about the teacher being autocratic or I don't know how to put it. We are talking about assessment here. If he or she wants to measure certain qualities, you get it, you can have about 5 questions and it will be only 2 of them or only 1 of them that the teacher will say use this approach or use that approach. You get it? So it's not all the questions that the students are restricted that you should do this or you should do that, or no. So you as the assessor, what domain do you seek to measure? Do you get it? That is how assessment should be. It shouldn't be like this is what the students like, so they should do it. This is what the students like, so they should do it. There are some students in learning mathematics, they are not good. But when it comes to let's use our hands, our legs to do something, they will excel. Do you get it? Mathematics is a universal language. Do you get it? Standardized thing. And patient was saying that supposing you restrict the students that they should use the method of completing the squares, you are imposing your something on them. The question is, did the teacher teach you the other methods? That is the question. Were you taught using those methods? If you were taught, then you as a student, it is your duty to learn to understand, not to restrict yourself to what you think you are comfortable with. That is not mathematics learning. Do you get it? You were taught how to use all the approaches. So it would have been autocratic if I didn't teach you and I asked you to use it. But if I taught you using all those approaches, then you as a student, why are you not willing to learn those approaches? Do you get it? They are, listen, they are all important. And that approach that you think it is easy, for someone it is hard. Okay. To get a standardized thing. Listen, to get a standardized thing. Use this. General. Do you get it? In class assessment, we don't measure student like, so you use this approach and I assess you. Use this approach and I assess you. That is not how we do it. For example, the WASI question that they set. Okay. Do they consider any student learning ability before setting them?
I'm sure they take into consideration.
They take into consideration not the approach you are conversant with. There are some questions, use this. And that's everyone.
That's where the whole problem is coming from.
They have their reason for doing that. So you think like they are just there and they want you to use that. You think like they just want to do that. Is that what you think? That an examiner will just say, use this approach to solve this. Like he's happy, he don't know what he's doing and he just telling you to use that. They have their reasons for doing that. That is why I said we are in the 21st century and there are some certain skills that need to be mastered by the students. And in some instances where you don't restrict these students, they will always go the easy way, right? Using approaches that will not measure those abilities that you want to measure. Do you get it?
Yeah.
That is why in some cases, educators will restrict you to do this, to do that. Right? Mm-hmm. Good. So if you bring it to our normal settings, as I already established, like home, you have a child there. Of course, if you leave the child, there are some children out there who lacks parents guidance and things, right? Mm. Yet they make it. But ask yourself, is it always that the approach or the ways they took is good or not? I cited an example. Solving trigonometric equation. When I was doing my internship at the Barakezi Senior High School, I asked students to find the value of x and I gave them this question: tan into bracket x plus 30 equal to 1 on 2. If these students has overgeneralized the idea of expanding algebraic expression, and that is exactly what they did. They multiplied the tan by x to get tan x, and then the tan by 30 to get tan 30. Is it acceptable in mathematics? Is it acceptable? That is not acceptable, right?
Okay, but if we are to talk about students who struggle to learn mathematics.
Listen. There's nothing like someone is struggling, so There's nothing like
So
that.
in order to include everyone
Listen,
in the
and I
assessment,
said it is not all questions that students are restricted. You can get about 10 questions and only 2 that the student will be restricted to use this, to do that, to do that. And it is the motive that the assessor has. That is why he is doing that. There are some certain things we measure in assessment. There are some certain domains or dimensions that we measure. And maybe in using that approach is the only way that can help you to measure that. Do you get it? If you are always that type who like using formulas to solve things, formulas goes with what? Memorization. You memorize it, you put it down, then you insert the values. Is that not formula things? In that case, what critical thinking ability is the student going to develop? But if I ask you to, it's like proving by induction. So you see, this one you would think before you prove or you arrive at the final answer. Do you get it? So there are some approaches which demands the application of critical thinking. So if that is what you seek to measure, then you should restrict the student. So it is not just there that restrict them to worry them. No, there are some domains. If you want to measure, you have to restrict the student to using certain approaches.
okay. All right, thank you very much, Nanaya. Patient, what do you say about this? It seems to be very interesting as we go along with this particular topic.
You see, when you go to the curriculum, the objectives, it will be stated by the end of this lesson, the student will be able to use the method of factorization to solve quadratic equation. Maybe the objective 2, the use of quadratic formula to solve, maybe objective 3, the use of the method of completing the square. Do you think they are just there? Each and every one has a domain or dimension it is measuring. So if we always leave the student to use the methods that they like or conversant with, then the Bloom's taxonomy will remain at the record. Okay. Because I will just have to get the formula here. If I think that is the easy way, I'll just have to memorize it here. And as memorization helps students, are we not the same people criticizing the memorization route or learning than things? Do you get it? So if the teacher is that type that restricts students to use some certain methods, then you as a student, you try your possible best to master all, so that you go into the exams or you know that, oh, anyone that my teacher will say I should use, at least I can use it, right? Rather than leaving the student to only focus on one that he or she thinks will be feasible for the question. And by the time the student will realize that approach is not going to.
But here you are delving back into the what's the name, memorization, the recall, because the way you are saying it, let's be real. Now, if the teacher gives me a question, tells me that I should know all the method, I'll be forced to memorize if I don't understand. Let's be real, there are a lot of formulas in discrete maths I don't understand, but I memorize them. Okay, you have to memorize them, because like at that point I know this thing is a do or die matter. So if I'm not hot on it, I will lose a lot of marks, because the moment they give me the question, they restrict use completing of the square. I have no option. So I have to memorize the steps. Or when I have to divide the coefficient of x square by its number. I have to do this half square, this, add it to both sides, do. Meaning I'm memorizing the steps. I'm memorizing. I'm not understanding. The only thing I'll say is that first of all, I'll divide A throughout. The coefficient of the x squared throughout. Then I'll let it stand alone. I'll let it do. No, we are just there are other ways, but we are just using something that like is simple and everybody can easily relate to it. Because whether you like it or not, the moment you bring restriction, you are forcing someone to memorize. If the person doesn't understand, the person is forced to memorize.
There's nothing like force in education. You are shaping the students. Do you get it? There's nothing like a teacher is forcing you to do this in education. you are shaping them to gather some qualities which at the end of it all will help them better their life or survive in this real world. So there's nothing like the teacher is forcing you in education. There's nothing like that. As far as the teacher taught you that you as a student, it is your duty to learn and master it. Those approaches that the teachers take their students through, they don't just take them through just for that sake. They all have their reason behind. There is a reason behind a teacher taking you through the method of completing the squares. There's a reason behind a teacher telling you to use the quadratic formula to do this. So there's nothing like someone is forcing the other. There's nothing like that. Each and everyone has the reason why we teach them that way, like the graphical approach. You use the graph, you plot, they meet at somewhere. You may go to a different context in mathematics where this graphical approach that you were taught, you can apply it there. Linear programming and other things. We draw all these graphs, find out where these lines will meet, and other stuffs. And you see, all these things that we are talking about. You see, Ghana, we are using this spiral curriculum type where students revisit topics and things. So if I've been taught how to plot points on graph then things, I can apply it somewhere. So they don't just, so like if you are saying that they should be left alone to use what they are conversant with, then you are trying to say that the teachers should always teach the easy approaches to students. That is what you mean. Like if you are saying that there are some stuffs that are difficult to understand, and for that reason students should be allowed to go by using the easy method, then you are trying to say that students should always be taught using the easy ways, which will not help them after school. Do you get it? Yeah. So if the students always want to use the easy ways, then it means that, like, from patience now, then teachers should always teach the easy ways, which will not help the student. Do you get it? That is how it is.
All right, viewers and listeners, thank you for your time. I think this particular live section of this particular topic should end here. So we will continue in the next episode. We will still continue whether students should be allowed to use their own method or they should be restricted. Thank you very much for your time. See you next time. Bye.